And then we read in 1821, then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, thus with violence the great city Babylon shall be thrown down and shall not be found anymore. And this picture that is painted here is very characteristic of Hebraic philology, which uses rich imagery to present a truth in addition to words. They want to paint a picture as well. The Lord often uses this visual approach in his teaching and in connection with his parables, of course. He spoke in a parable about the fruitless fig tree, and at the same time, he dried up a particular fig tree while passing by it on the streets of Jerusalem. He cursed the fig and said, may no fruit ever come from you again, and the fig tree withered at once. So he didn't just say it, he did it, he showed it. And this is what's going on here in 1821. They're showing how it's going to be done. The truth of the parable was presented in words, followed by the visual miracle that cemented this teaching. And this combination of words followed by the miracle provides a powerful impression to the eyewitnesses that the truth that was prophesied verbally and visually will become a reality. And Saint Andrew of Caesarea says, as a great stone sinks and never reappears on the surface of the water, in the same way, Babylon will sink and will be lost forever without a trace, like Nineveh. And this loss forever does not only have a historical dimension, but an eternal one. So it's not just lost forever historically, but eternally, since the Revelation specifically says that nothing unclean, nothing abominable will enter the kingdom of God. So it's gone for all eternity. There will be no more Babylon, no more noetic, no more physical Babylon unto eternity. And then 1822 to 24, we read, and the sound of harpers and minstrels, of flute players and trumpeters shall be heard they in thee no more. And a craftsman of any crafts shall be found in thee no more. And the sound of the millstone shall be heard in thee no more. And the light of a lamp shall shine in thee no more. Shall shine probably. And the voice of a bridegroom and the bride shall be heard in thee no more. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, and all the nations were deceived by thy sorcery. Thy sorcery. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all who have been slain on earth. Obviously, not describing a simple historical Babylon. All these, but both and, right? All these musical artists and artisans. Let's see if we missed, I think we missed something, but that's all right. It's not that important. All these musical artisans and entertainers with all their activities will vanish permanently. All games and shows will be gone forever. All Game of Thrones and Monday Night Football and all this is gone. There's no place for any of this in the kingdom of God. In this verse, one can detect three main causes responsible for the destruction of Babylon: the plutocratic extortion of the nations, the coercion into a life of corruption, and the persecution and severe abuse of the Christians on a global scale. Let me repeat that. The three main causes responsible for the destruction of Babylon. Number one, the plutocratic, in other words, getting rich off, the extortion of the nations, the coercion, the manipulation, in other words, into a life of corruption of all the nations. They were manipulated and coerced and pushed and pulled to fall into sin and corruption and to live for the passion so that they could become rich off of them. And then finally, the persecution, because they don't want any Christian morality because it takes away their filthy lucre, right? The persecution and severe abuse of the Christians on a global scale. And the elder says, I'd like to briefly comment on for thy merchants were the great men of the earth, because it is a very accurate and contemporary image. Thy merchants were the great men of the earth. That phrase he wants to say, the truth is that all of the imperialist nations, according to, and of course that's Britain and England, right, France, all these that went into the colonialists in the third world, that developed the world empires, ended up bilking the nations of their material wealth. Of course, it's still going on. They go into the third world, they go into these various countries for their oil and exploiting them and manipulating them and using them and never developing them in any real way from the riches that these countries have. This is amazing that it's still going on, and much more so in our day. It's all about global dominion and using all these countries of the world. They're bilking the nations of their material wealth because this was the objective behind their imperialist agenda, to become rich, to use the resources of other nations to live in luxury. However, when wealth becomes the main objective, corruption and ethical decadence follow. You know, there's this is very interesting, because we're oftentimes pushed to adopt and side with and identify with one of two political parties or political wings or political persuasions, right? You got to either be a leftist or a rightist, you got to be a Republican or a Democrat. And you can see throughout this lecture, actually, that the elder does not fall into that trap. He doesn't become identified with some ideology or some political party or some worldly outlook. And this criticism that he has right here is usually the criticism of the leftists against the colonialists and all the rest. And so it's very interesting that he's saying, yes, this is a legitimate and a very real criticism, that they have used and abused and manipulated and coerced and totally stripped the third world for filthy lucre, for the lust and the greed. And this is a part of why they're going to be destroyed, the various Babylonian empires that exist, and insofar wherever they exist, right? So that is the main objective. And of course, if that's the main objective, then morality and love of neighbor is going to go by the wayside. And finally, in such a debased and abominable society, the gospel of Christ is not only not accepted, but highly persecuted. It has to be persecuted. We said it from the beginning. It's not just that they're going to mourn because of the loss of something from the destruction of Babylon. They would mourn at the loss by having to become Christians, by having a Christian morality. And so Christians are an enemy to this whole Babylonian system, right? So the gospel of Christ is not only not accepted, but it's highly persecuted. Christianity, the church, and the gospel are ridiculed and persecuted, of course. And the same people who rejected Christ and his Messiah, the people who are accepting and waiting for their own Messiah, for a worldly Messiah, someone who will give power on this earth and a utopia on this earth, those same people are the ones who are getting rich, filthy rich, and they're the richest of the rich in this world, and they're persecuting the Christians softly, intensely, in various ways. The true Christians are attacked, exiled, slain, or even beheaded. Today, the three main characteristics making Babylon deserving of destruction are very prevalent in the superpowers of the world, who are represented by the Noetic Babylon, right? He doesn't just say America. He says the superpowers of the world. That might include some of those very large and powerful countries that are not always identified as the Noetic Babylon, right? So we need to be very honest and frank. Wherever there is filthy lucre, there is persecution. This is the Noetic Babylon. And so these three main characteristics are very prevalent today in the world. How much more today than 40 years ago? And that is the end of this lecture.